Today, I'm going to be speaking with Chris Tarbell, former FBI special agent and now founding partner at NAXO, was involved in the eventual takedown of the Silk Road, which I've spoken a little bit about before. Chris, great to have you on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, David. I appreciate it.
So, to start just somewhere, as I read about the story of how Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road were ultimately taken down, one of the things that is often described as the story is told in many of the books about it is that it's really like the prototypical example of different law enforcement agencies in the US not working well together, which is sort of like this narrative that often exists about, well, the FBI wants credit. Well, this also involved HSI and it involved all these different agencies, and the Silk Road would have been taken down much sooner were egos put aside. That's a story that's often told. Do you think that that's fair as far as the way that it went?
No, not exactly. The other agencies were doing good investigations. HSI had good investigations going as far as going up the chain. But unfortunately, this is a new way of dealing drugs. I mean, this was, they were the buyers didn't know who the dealers were. The dealers didn't know who the admins were. And so it really was just, it didn't go a normal investigative route. It went this new cyber route.
So for people who don't know what the Silk Road was, can you give them sort of a brief synopsis? I mean, it was a dark web site that was originally, I believe, dealing mostly in illegal drugs, but actually came to be much more than that.
Yeah, it was an online dark market website operated on the Tor network with the Onion router. It was a hidden network developed by the Navy back in the late 90s. And you can't trace IPs traditionally through it. It works on a different protocol that kind of hides where the traffic is coming from and going to. But it also worked through anonymity through cryptocurrency. This was the early stages of Bitcoin. So you literally could go on there and buy almost anything. It was a $1.2 billion empire by the time we took it down. Now, there were two things you couldn't buy on Silk Road. You couldn't buy guns because that was on a different website. And you also couldn't buy fake IDs, or sorry, fake college degrees. You could buy fake IDs, but you couldn't get a fake college degree. They didn't want you to be like a doctor and not really have the education.
When this started to become an investigation that involved multiple agencies, what was really, or let me put it a different way, what were there concerns about where it could go, or was the concern really what was already taking place with it?
Really, it was what was already taking place. In the FBI, and I can't speak for HSI or IRS or DEA in their investigations. The FBI investigation really came out of, we had a lot of cases around that time. It was 2011, 2012. A lot of cases just ended. It was Tor. We can't do anything about it. So we had just done a big case involving Anonymous and the arresting of Sabu, Hector Monsegur, and one of the other guys on the Anonymous case was a guy named Jeremy Hammond, and he was arrested and he was using Tor. So it was one of those interesting things. We didn't do anything with Tor; it just happened. That's how he's hiding, and it took us an extra 6 months to find him. But once that case was over, we started sitting around and thinking about maybe we should take a look at Tor and see what we can do. There's so many cases being closed just because it comes up as a Tor IP address.
If I recall correctly, a big kind of breaking point in starting to look at Ross Ulbricht was someone involved in the investigation, and it's been a little while since I read the book about the investigation. Someone put together an old handle that Ross used on some message board, which then they figured out, oh, that's I recognize that. That's also appearing elsewhere. Remind us of that detail, but maybe more importantly, how long did the Silk Road investigation go before the name Ross Ulbricht ever actually was mentioned?
Well, so that there's a path there. There's a story there that it's kind of difficult. So there the connecting the name you're looking for is Frosty, and
Yes.
so someone on a message board way back at the start of Silk Road posted, "Hey, I'm starting this Onion site, and it's going to use cryptocurrency. If anybody has any programming help, reach out to me at Frosty." and it was posted in the username Frosty in the forum.
Right.
They said, reach out to me at ross.ulbricht@gmail.com,
Right.
which again is a clue in our world.
Yes.
Not until we found the server and was able to go through sort of the networks of the server and find that there was a backup server in Philadelphia. And then there was a computer that was reaching out to the backup server, and the name of the computer was Frosty. So now we have, this computer being run by DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, the guy who operated Silk Road, and then this posting of from Frosty with the email address rossalbricht@gmail.com.
And that was originally the way that the investigation turned to look specifically at Ulbricht.
Yeah, I mean, we had to develop a few other things before. We knew that he was in the Pacific Coast time because there was a Jabber server that he had set up. That's a communication server for his admins to talk on, and we knew that his time frame was around then. But that specifically, that was where we connected Ross through that Frosty connection.
If you look at critiques of the way that Ulbricht was ultimately prosecuted, it seems what most often comes up is something along the lines of, the drug part, increasingly there's a view that drugs should be decriminalized at minimum. Many should actually be legalized, more commonly with cannabis than with cocaine. But this is sort of like the way things have kind of moved over the last decade, 15 years, particularly libertarians like Ulbricht subscribe to that ideology. And there are many who say that were it only the drugs alone, really what was happening shouldn't actually have been against the law. However, it went over into you could hire hitmen on the Silk Road, and it went over into all this other stuff that I think is more universally thought of as like, that stuff definitely shouldn't be legal. When someone like you or others in the FBI are investigating something like this, how much does it matter at all what your personal feelings are about, for example, which drugs, if any, should be illegal or decriminalized or legalized? Or does it quite literally never enter into the work as you were investigating something like this?
It really never enters into the work. I mean, so I was assigned to New York. I was a special agent in New York, and I like to say in New York, it's so specialized. There's I jokingly say there's a bank robbery, and the first question was the bank robber left-handed or right-handed? Because there's one squad handles left-handed bank robbery, the other handles right-handed bank robberies. You're put on a squad, and we were criminal cyber intrusions. So we were the criminal hacking crew. That was our squad. And there's another squad that did national security hacking. So really, I was just investigating hacking. And really, Tor had come up. We had partnered up with Southern District of New York, who had a case with the DEA at the time, and then brought in the IRS. And so really, I was looking at 18 USC 1030. Violation of hacking tools, and that was one of the things sold on Silk Road was hacking tools or hacks for hire, and so that was sort of the nexus. But really, when we opened up the Silk Road case, we opened up 25 other onion sites, and it really was more looking into using Tor as a way of hiding criminal activity.
When you see the sentence that Ulbricht ultimately got, which was, I believe, 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole,
plus 40 years.
Plus 40 years. Okay. Does that seem like the right sentence for what he did?
That is not my decision. I'm a part of the, thank God the government has different branches. I was part of the executive branch where we enforce the laws. The legislative branch does the, what laws there are, and the judicial branch just come up with the punishments. So that's way beyond my scope of expertise.
No, but as a guy who now is out and just might have an opinion.
I really don't have an opinion on it.
Yeah. And I'm not suggesting, I don't know that. I mean, sometimes people say that because they don't want to answer. I actually am open to the idea that you really that's not the way you think about these things. You have a particular role in this whole thing.
Yeah, certainly. I wouldn't be upset if someone I arrested, was let go. I arrested Hector Monsegur. He spent, months in jail, was facing 125 years, but did a great job. I'm not offended by all the work I put in, and he got out and he was only in prison for 9 months for what he did. That doesn't offend me in any sort of way. So yeah, I really don't have an opinion on it.
What's the current state of dark web marketplaces? Because it's not really a topic in the news right now, but it's sort of like by definition, the idea is it's dark web, so you don't necessarily know about it. These aren't indexed websites. You need a special browser to access it. Do you know much about the current state of these types of marketplaces?
I do. I'm still involved in them. So yeah, you would have asked me right after Silk Road and right after Ross got sentenced to all that 2 life sentences in 40 years. I would have said it would have gone down. I would have. No one would do this. It's crazy, but it actually exploded right after that.
Huh.
There was a big state of people setting up these sites and stealing people's cryptocurrency. But now it's becoming to there's places and I don't want to tell kids how to get there.
Right.
But there are many dark market websites out there that you can still do many more than there were back in the day.
Are they ever based in the United States, or is that just like the height of ignorance to approach it that way?
I think some people probably still do it in the United States. It's sort of a whack-a-mole. Someone makes a mistake, a configuration issue, or something like that, and law enforcement gets them. But the latest takedowns haven't really used infrastructure in the United States that I've seen.
You mentioned the connection to crypto and that crypto was often the payment method that was used. One of the interesting, and full disclosure, I have no emotional attachment to this question. I also have no opinion. I was an not early, but 2016, I bought some Bitcoin and it did really well. And I've mostly sold all of it. And I have no opinion as to where it's going or how much it's used for criminality. One of the arguments that was made early about Bitcoin was it's overwhelmingly used for criminal activities. But my understanding is that when the Silk Road was shut down, the throughput of transactions barely changed at all, which sort of would be a counterpoint to the idea that Bitcoin was primarily being used for criminal transactions. Did you in your investigative work come to have an opinion about that and how regularly criminal motivations were at play for Bitcoin transactions?
So, in my world as an FBI agent, I only looked at criminal activity. So,
Right.
I saw it attached to everything. I mean, it really was the birth of ransomware. I mean, we've
Mm.
had encryption for, 75 years, digital encryption, and that sort of thing, all the way back to, the Nazis' encryption, their Enigma machines. So that's not new. What really was the rise for ransomware was the popularity of cryptocurrency.
Mm.
We're still fighting that to this day on that sort of thing. I am a technologist. I liked cryptocurrency. I see the point of it. I like that two people can meet in a far off place and make a transaction, and it's locked in place within 60 minutes at most. But I see a lot of criminal activity connected to it.
What are you seeing now in terms of the trends of the cyber threats, scams, phishing at the individual level, if you're able to comment on it? About 5 years ago, I was getting a lot of the, hey, you owe tax money and we're sending the police to your house, to which I would say, send them. Sounds interesting. Obviously, I know I don't, I'm not giving you any money. Social security scams, give us access to your computer and we'll like log into your bank, that sort of stuff. I'm not being targeted by that anymore. I'm getting a lot more sort of like telemarketing stuff, like wanting to sell me warranties on vehicles I don't even have and this sort of thing. What are the trends right now? What's going on?
So we're seeing a lot of phishing scams for crypto thefts. So any sort of like accounts that are taken over where it's sent out that you're a part of a crypto network, if you're part of an exchange, you'll start getting a lot of phishing emails and the vishing, the phone calls. Give me access, and then because it's so easy, you don't have to. They give access to their computer and just take the wallets right there. You don't have to convince them to do anything more. I think one of the biggest trends, and so I host a podcast with Hector Monsegur, Sabu, the guy arrested, hacker in the Fed, and he made a prediction, and I agree with him, that this year we're going to see a lot more insider threats.
Hmm.
People inside networks who we give access to are going to be stealing data. He kind of made that prediction based on the large technology layoffs we've seen lately. But we're seeing more and more. Networks have been protected from the outside, and very few people are doing things to protect internal network stuff.
What's the lowest hanging fruit right now just for individuals in terms of protecting themselves?
What can they do better?
Yeah, I mean, I know people who, for example, they just don't pick up their phone anymore. And just by doing that, unless they quite literally know who's calling them, even if they think it might be their bank, they just do not pick up the phone as an example. And that right there knocks 50% down or that type of thing.
Yeah, no, I would definitely do that. The email stuff is still the phishing stuff, but one of the easiest things you can do is called segmentation. There's no more flat networks at work. You'll never see just one router and everyone connects to the same router in any office, but we're seeing that at home still. A lot of people just have one router. They give their passwords out to people that come and visit, or and that sort of thing. Or when they connect Internet of the Things, when your thermostat is connected to your router. A lot of thermostats and things like that have hard-coded passwords, or they don't change the administrative passwords. Well, that's a hole right into your network. So segmentations, either through VLANs or having physical different devices, have more than one router in your house, and secure it that way.
Oh, that's interesting. So for example, you could set up a separate Wi-Fi network for the thermostats alone, and you on your phone never connect to that network.
Yeah, anything you do banking on should not be on the same as your Internet of Things. Especially things that punch what I call punching holes in the firewall. So because you can change your thermostat from outside your house,
Right.
because you can look at cameras that you've had connected to your internet, those are holes in your firewall. That means that it's an entry point into the defense system. So have a different network that doesn't have that connected to it, used for your banking, logging into banking accounts and that sort of thing.
All right, that's useful and actionable, and it's not unrealistic. Sometimes the tips you read are like, yes, I could do that, but I'm basically segregating myself out of the way society is operating, which is not practical.
I try to give something useful.
It's like a diet that you can only sustain for a week. It's not super useful long term. Yeah.
No, these routers are super cheap now, so it's really a thing you can do. And configuration. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there that can help you configure different networks.
We have been speaking with former FBI Special Agent Chris Tarbell, now a founding partner at NAXO. Chris, really appreciate your time and your insights today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it. It was fun.